One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We're really excited today to have on the show Leah Chaney. Leah is the Chief Experience Officer for a customer support agency that she founded called BetterGrowth. And we're going to talk all about the important tenets of customer success and how to think about customer success from an integrated, holistic customer experience perspective. So it's a really important conversation, particularly now as so many customers and companies are focused on how to keep your customers, how do you engage your customers in the right way. So I'm excited to have it. Now, before we get there, we want to thank our sponsors. Our first sponsor is LinkedIn. Sales teams have had to quickly adapt to a new normal. With limits on in-person meetings, it's even more important to double down on your digital selling strategy. Sales leaders must shift their focus to empowering talent, strengthening customer relationships, and acquiring new opportunities in order to survive and thrive in this environment. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a relationship-based digital selling tool that is designed to help you do just that. It can help your sales teams increase their pipeline, win rates, and deal sizes. Go to sales.linkedin.com to try it out for yourself. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the #1 sales engagement platform. Outreach revolutionizes customer engagement by moving away from siloed conversations to a streamlined and customer-centric journey. Leveraging the next generation of artificial intelligence, the platform allows sales reps to deliver consistent, relevant, and responsible communication for each prospect every time, enabling personalization at scale that was previously unthinkable. Now, without further ado, let's listen to my interview with Leah Chaney. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today, we are incredibly excited to have on the show Leah Chaney. Leah is the Chief Experience Officer for BetterGrowth, which is a growth agency based in Portland, Oregon. She's been a pioneer for customer experience practices for the last 2 decades, focusing her work on putting customers at the heart of SaaS and service-based technology organizations. In Leah's words, having the customer experience built into the DNA of your organization is your magic key to success. When not coaching teams on how to build a service-centered customer experience organization, she is snuggling her 2 pug mixes, rewatching the Goonies for the millionth time, or taking spins on her Peloton. Leah and her wife are anxiously awaiting the birth of their first child in July 2020. So first of all, congratulations on the arrival of your pending child.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's it's probably going to be a little bit of a life changer, we're thinking, but yeah, I appreciate that. And,
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I assume they'll be very similar to the pugs. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm born in July, so if it's middle July, that baby will be a Cancer, not from a zodiacal perspective. That's not a word, so that means emotional, moody, but very creative. That's how I fancy myself.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I'm a Virgo, so I can't judge. No, we're actually excited. The due date is actually, around July 18th, so that's pretty mid.
Wow, I'm July 19th.
Well, there you go.
My birthday.
Awesome.
Wow. All right. Well, I'll be cheering for you. So, Leah, welcome to the show. Your title is Chief Experience Officer. The company is called BetterGrowth. Mm-hmm. We start the podcast typically with what we call your baseball card, which is really an opportunity for you to describe your company in whatever way you want to, and give you the opportunity to give a little bit of a pitch for what you do. So, tell us about BetterGrowth, and tell us. I'm also curious, when you say that your title is Chief Experience Officer, that's obviously not a title that is super common. So tell us, when you think about what that means, why you chose that title as it relates to your personal business.
Yeah. So, to start with that, BetterGrowth is my company. So I got to give myself that title, which was a pretty cool thing. The first couple of titles definitely wouldn't have resonated with anyone. But yeah, I mean, to start with BetterGrowth overall. So I've spent the last couple of decades at this point being in customer success. I got into it really early on. I worked for some amazing companies and basically spent the last couple of decades building customer success teams or fixing them. And then I found that oftentimes I'd work myself out of a job because once things work, I get pretty bored. So, my wife and I moved from Austin out to Portland, Oregon about 2.5 years ago. And when I finished setting up a company's customer success team that was getting started here in the States, I just decided, I was like, it's time. What if I did this at scale? Like, what if I just helped companies start, fix, or grow customer success teams? So BetterGrowth is an agency here in Portland, Oregon, that myself and my awesome founders, which one of is my wife, work to help companies with their customer success needs. So we have a training platform that we've built where we work people through making customer experience a holistic approach within the organization. So very focused on combating churn as a whole, like a full organization versus just a customer success team. And just working to get great synergy between different departments in an organization to make sure that the customer experience journey is first outlined and then executed on.
Let's dive into that, because it's a topic that I'm really, really passionate and curious about. And I run a business that is a recurring revenue business focused on obviously our customers who we call members. And I want to put them at the center of everything. So when you talk about customer experience, like, give us the tenets, give us the basic principles. Let's say a founder comes to you and says, I want to do that. I want to put customer experience into the DNA of my organization. How do I do it, Leah? Give us your principles.
Well, first, I'm going to start by saying like what you did. The first step is humanizing the customer, right? And so not even calling them a customer, but calling them a member. Target in the early days called them guests and continued to do that throughout time. Like, that's the first step is considering them something beyond just your bottom line number, just a data point. So that's the first step. So great job in doing that. I'm sure you do a lot more than that as well. But the next basic fundamentals of it is that you take what made you passionate about your platform or what your company stands on, and you find a way to make sure that you serve that purpose to your customer. So that is basically making sure that every aspect of every team focuses on what that stands for the customer. So some companies that have done it right have done things like having a chair of a different color in any meeting room with more than 4 people. So somebody's always sitting in the customer chair. Some companies have written it into their mission statement. But whatever you choose to do, the main important thing is that in every major decision, from a product feature to even your branding, that you're considering how it's going to impact your customers and what you're going to do to help your customer's customer. Wow.
Okay. How about, the evolution of customer success has happened over the last couple of years, and there's a lot of debates about it. So I'd love to bring you into the conversation. When you think about organizational alignment, do you believe that some people say that customer success should be a separate direct reporting line up through to the CEO? There should be a chief customer officer, and that person should oversee customer success. And even perhaps, but I'm curious on what you think, that team should not have a revenue responsibility. Maybe there's a churn prevention responsibility, but maybe the actual key performance indicator is like NPS, Net Promoter Score, or some kind of engagement score as opposed to revenue. And then there's another world where a lot of revenue leaders, a lot of sales leaders are used to having responsibility for the entirety of the revenue journey of the customer, which includes their retention and expansion. And so they want to run customer success. Where do you sit in that debate, such as it is?
Okay, Sam, so you opened up a whole can of worms here.
I'm sorry.
You have to be prepared for my response. No. Listen, I'm really passionate about this, but you didn't ask me a question that's black and white. You asked me a lot of questions that should be dissected into micro thoughts. So cool. Let's start with your first question that is basically like, should the customer success team report into the CEO? It really depends on the organization. Like, if it's my company, they're going to report to the chief experience officer, and that might be your CEO. Like, one of my points that I'm trying to argue out there is that the most powerful chief experience officer is the CEO, and that they should drop the CEO title. Like, if you really want to be successful and you really care about your customer, why do you need the title of CEO? Why can't you be the chief experience officer, which includes your internal experience and what you're trying to grow? The second thing I want to talk about is this seat at the revenue table that is such a big conversation. So just to get to the part that everybody in sales wants to hear me say, absolutely, CS should be at the revenue table. They actually should have a huge seat and probably be around 25 to 30% of your monthly or quarterly revenue. But taking it back a step at how you get there, First, you have to look at the fact that customer success has evolved. Just like marketing, when you used to say marketing to someone, you would picture somebody doing advertising, right? And over time, marketing and advertising kind of separated. Marketing had more seat at the revenue table. The same thing has happened to the evolution of customer success that came about later. When we started in customer success, back when I was working for a rocket ship out of Austin, Texas, we didn't even know what to call it. I have had so many titles in the early years of my customer success journey that made no sense. But like, we just knew, like, smart companies, it's not we. Luckily, I worked for someone that knew that, and I learned this trick and wrote it down. But basically, that if you spent time on building a relationship with your customer, that you would have more success. And so when that first started, the mindset was that it was all about the relationship. And just like a friendship, you don't ask your friends for money, right? But over time, as that evolved, what we realized was that was we as the, organizational leaders of customer success teams, that didn't make sense. That it was if your product was good and if your customer success team was showing them how to make your product make them successful, that why would that be shady, for lack of a better word, to ask them to continue and to actually do more, to have more of a result. So I think along the lines, a few years ago, it started to be very apparent that it was actually awkward to just pass that over to a sales member who probably hasn't had that relationship to come in and ask for money. So through coaching and training customer success teams to have a seat at the revenue table and to have those hard conversations or actually have those easy conversations if they've done their job, then yes, they should have a seat at the revenue table. So sorry, again, I know I spoke a lot there, but again, really passionate about the fact that there's an evolution here. It's not black and white.
Well, Leah, you're the guest. We want you to speak a lot. So just, you don't have to, apologize.
You don't have to ask me to speak a lot twice.
Well, good. I'm asking you once. So I think a lot of people listening will feel refreshed to hear that. Does that mean, in your opinion, do you believe in the concept of the chief revenue officer and that customer success is one input and that there's one person that oversees all of the revenue, including customer success, which, to your point, also includes the experience of the customer? Or do you believe that the revenue organization should maybe have different chiefs, different people that are responsible for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I do think that there's a seat for a chief revenue officer that is focused on the financial of it, but they should either report to or be very close to the chief experience officer versus something else. So, yeah.
Another challenge that people have had is they feel like sometimes people that want to go into customer success are not money motivated or sales oriented. Have you found that kind of like the archetype for the prototypical customer success person needs to evolve to the point so that it can include people that are comfortable not just delivering great experiences, but also asking for money or for, in consideration of those experiences?
Yeah, listen, again, I think the thing here is you got to treat customer success like you would a sales team and realize that there's different aspects of it, right? Like you've got your tech team that's probably answering support questions. That's more technically mindset. You've got your customer success manager who's managing the relationship. And you've got, just like in a sales team, you have your SDRs, you have your, account executives. You got to treat it the same way. So yeah, your support reps probably not going to be great at like going in there and upselling the customer, but your customer success manager is who you're focusing on that. And you should treat them the same way you treat a salesperson. And that's train them to do that and make sure that your interview process is including people with that mindset. So if you hire people that are capable of wearing that, both hats of the relationship and sales mindset, you're going to have success there. And like, it's just simply the same way you would handle hiring somebody that's an SDR. So if you're a company that has more entry level people in that role, you train them like you would an SDR. You train them on the tactics of sales and relationship and how they work in tandem with one another. If you hire someone senior, they should have that experience, and you just make sure that your interview process is weeding out people that might not be capable of having conversations that are revenue centered.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So let me ask you, when BetterGrowth is going into a company and, first thing, as you mentioned, they're sort of principled, there are first principles. And one of them is that they're not the customer. They're something other than that. They are the guest. They are a human being. And we need to give them a great experience and make sure they have a seat at the table. But what tactical steps, I'm sure you have some process by which when they say, okay, Leah, I want to put customer experience at the center of the business, tell us what to do from a step-by-step perspective. Do you have a methodology? Do you have, what is the process by which you deliver that and you potentially help them reorganize so that they can put customer experience at the center?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Sam. And it's different for every organization, just like the customer success metric is different for every customer, right? Like, I think if you try to blanket things, it gets really hard. Where it gets scary is like you want to scale. So the tricks to do that at scale, in my opinion, are to start internally. There needs to be internal conversation. The company needs to understand that they're bought in. One of the things that BetterGrowth does immediately before they touch on churn and everything else is they help the company to create the customer experience journey. So what is every step that the customer goes through? BetterGrowth, to help that along, has created, different tools and tricks to do that. One of those is just simply identifying different areas, like if it's a relay race, that everybody would be responsible. So we've broken it up in our case to what we call the 4 A's. So acquisition, activation, adoption, and advocacy. And so basically, that is the journey that most companies have. Acquisition is the marketing outreach, right? Like the brand image you're putting out there, outbound sales, like anything that's going to acquire a customer is the first step in that experience. So is your collateral out there? Like if it's a theme park, right? Is it representing what their experience is going to be? Are you just putting things out there that's going to be clickbait or get people in and then they sign up for it and feel like they've been bamboozled, right? Like, so that's the first step in a good customer experience, is making sure that the outreach is true to what the experience is going to be. From there into activation of it, that's where the customer is signing up, they're paying for it. That's where sales is involved. That's where the baton pass back to that relay race is going to go from sales to customer success and to the customer support team. That's where they start getting onboarded. The adoption phase, which is the red hot, most important phase in the customer journey, is when the customer has actually started using it. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of people get super lazy and go into what I call quote unquote maintenance mode, right? And then from there, the last phase is advocacy. This is where most companies fail because they panic and ask the renewal questions in this last 90-day window when customers have already made their decision at that time. So that's why instead of calling it renewal phase, I call it advocacy, because they should have already made up their mind and you should now be using them to bring on more customers with their customer stories or their reviews, et cetera. Yeah, so I think that that's one of the main things. I will tell you that there's some things that are really handicapping companies right now, and that is relying solely on metrics like NPS. I'm not saying they don't have their place, but in my opinion, it's a vanity metric in its own way, right? Like you're only looking at how the customer feels about you, and you're not looking at what the customer needs. And that's why oftentimes I find out that companies that are just relying on a simple metric or even like a 5-star rating, it doesn't have to just be NPS, whatever you use for customer sentiment. Now the renewal comes up and you're like, but you love us. Yeah, but that's not what makes a customer renew, right? So I know that's long-winded, but hopefully I touched on your points enough.
Yeah, I want you have no reason to be self-conscious about being long-winded again.
Can you tell that to my wife? Can you write that down?
You are the guest. I don't want to be talking. I want to be listening because this is of great interest to me to be honest with you. Wait, so I have a bunch of follow-up questions. One of them is that you mentioned that adoption is the white hot phase. I've always sort of been told that onboarding is the most important phase because that's when you set them up to be successful. Do you disagree? I mean, I'm sure they're both important.
Totally disagree.
Great.
Totally
awesome.
disagree.
So
that's the honeymoon phase. That's the honeymoon phase. Are you kidding me? This is where they're proven to you think that sure, you might have some complicated questions. Sure, you can make a lot of mistake in that, right? Like this is where customers can have to repeat themselves if there's not a great handoff document or some way to communicate that. This is where, technical challenges that can go wrong. This is where you can drop the ball on training the customers to actually understand how to use it. But for the most part, this is the honeymoon phase. This is where you can really just get things going. And if you have a good process for onboarding, which I always, as a CS leader, made it its own team. So again, speaking to customer success, not just being one role, I've always said that there's 4 main points to customer success. And that is, your support team, that's your technical oriented support, ticket. guru. There's your onboarding team or your activation team, as I always titled them, because I'm big onto these 4A's that I love.
Yep.
And then you've got your customer success managers. And sometimes, and this is the one that I say, you have a liaison between sales and CS if you're not a baby startup. And then that role is your, customer success engineer or your sales engineer, whatever you want to call it. And I always say that person should have a tie-in role to both the CS leader and the sales leader.
Wow. Okay. This is interesting. So let me ask you about, I thought what you said about kind of advocacy is really, really interesting. Mm-hmm. And that people are asking the tough questions leading up to the renewal. So if you're thinking about, and you also mentioned that, too many companies, they go through the onboarding process or the activation process, as you call it, so that we can align with the 4A's. Mm-hmm. And they forget about adoption. They forget about, you say that they put them into maintenance mode. So when you think about the best companies, how do those best companies handle both adoption and, as you mentioned, advocacy when it comes to ensuring the renewal, preventing churn? Are there things that you see that are best practices that you really are making sure that all of your customers do that you don't see prevalent out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was really lucky, but also kind of scarred to one of the first companies I worked for is one of the best success stories I have in this. Working out of Austin, I worked for this little rocket ship that was a ratings and review company called Bizarre Voice. And their leadership team was all about the customer. And I just assumed that's how everyone was. But one of the things they did that I've always brought with me throughout coaching and that I've seen the most successful companies do is during that quote unquote maintenance phase, which I call the adoption phase, instead of just walking away and being like, well, they're paying, they're good, we're just going to focus on more money, they made sure that they had communication. And when I say they, not just the customer success manager. So like tiering out those customers and making sure that they were getting helpful tips from like the product teams on how to use the product for top customers, the top tiered customers that were, most important from a logo or revenue standpoint, that the senior leadership team would reach out and check in or give advice. Like, they were always front and center. And like for me, when I think about like my first experience with customer success, one of the things we did was have regular communication that was valuable to the customer. And somewhere along the lines, it became about you. Like communication was just like, hey, I want to make sure that you actually show up, as opposed to us being like, hey, here's a great way to get more ROI on your product. Like we just looked at benchmark data and customers that do this have more success. So looking at that with them, like what's in it for me? And then like sharing that with your customers to make them successful, and not just sending that to like the signature person, the person that like signs the contract and gives you more money. Yeah, sure. Add them on that collateral, but actually setting up your counterpart as a customer success manager at the organization that uses your product the most to look really good at their job. And somewhere along the lines, that value add just like dropped and it became about companies like, hey, tell me if you'd recommend me. Like, are you serious? Like that is so selfish. Like, I don't know. I'm really passionate about that. It doesn't mean you can't have like a check-in or get your scores, but like, man, when did we become all about ourselves? It's really hard to watch that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I totally hear what you're saying. So do you feel like companies, although I hear you that they need to deliver value, but they also need to know when things are off track or on track. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%.
And so when is the right time to do that? Because to your point, I think so many companies make the mistake of, the renewal's coming up in 30 days or 60 days. They reach out and they say, hey, your renewal's coming up. Let's have a conversation about it. And that's when they figure out that they're in trouble. But the problem with that is that the customer has formed their opinion about what to do. And oftentimes at the enterprise level, if you're going to drop somebody, if you're going to churn, then you've made that decision well before the renewal date, because you have all of this work to do to move off of the legacy platform and onto a new platform potentially. So when you think about how to manage the renewal process itself, what do you think are best practices?
Yeah. So again, it's so important to realize that there is no blueprint. And I realize a lot of people probably want one, but there are some great tools that you can adjust to your organization. So kind of starting with the red flags, that's the first thing with renewal. So you're 100% on the mark with that. So basically going back to your onboarding, what I call activation phase, that is where you can drop a ball. That's another spot you can miss the mark there in setting up what's important to them and then tracking that. So this is where customer success management tools are really important. And one of the first things I notice, especially with early stage companies, is I understand that you have a budget crunch, but there's 3 or 4 or 6 tools for sales teams. And then like CS is working on a spreadsheet, right? And that's just dumb. Like you need to either understand the complications of Salesforce and how they can work for collecting important data, if that's your CRM, to track certain milestones in CS, like usage drops, et cetera. Or you need to dig into your pockets and find a tool. You don't have to get the most expensive one. In fact, those usually you have to work for the tool versus the tool working for you. But you need to implement some kind of tool that connects to your API that helps you successfully track obvious red flags for you. For most people, that's going to be not logging in, or it's going to be a drop going from like using the product a lot to not at all, or not using the product at all. And like to scale your customer success efforts around that to prepare you for renewal, there needs to be alarms that go off, right? Like most customer success managed tools are going to send you, if you set up these parameters, are going to send you a notification. Your CS team now knows to prioritize that customer. You know, one of the best ways that I've been able to find that a customer left an organization was because somebody went from using the platform, you know, daily or weekly to like not using the platform, right? And then you should immediately be like, what's happening there? Because, you know, obviously one of the biggest risks of churn is losing your champion, which is why you should never have one champion. But again, these are all very important tools. And then for the renewal conversation should be taking place on a regular basis. So if you're doing like quarterly business reviews, every quarterly business review should be like, if you were up for renewal right now, Sam, would you renew with us? And what can we do to make sure you do when renewal time comes? Like, are you going to be offended if I asked you that question, Sam? Like if you were a BetterGrowth customer and I was like, hey, it's 3 months in. If your renewal was today, like, are we crushing it? What can we do better? Like, are you going to be offended if I ask you that?
No, I think so many people bring their own self-limiting beliefs into commercial and kind of business conversations. I'm never offended about any of it. I mean, I understand exactly, and I probably appreciate it, to be completely honest, because you're showing that you care about me.
Exactly. And you're 100% right. And if you don't, you're showing that you're scared. And so fear is what leads the majority of churn. And it usually starts with a CEO who's worked their tail off, right? She's built this, she's designed it, she's implemented it. This is her baby. It's taken off. She's got funding. And now renewals that are important are coming up and she doesn't want to know. She doesn't want to talk about it. She wants to put that on customer success. Customer success renewal comes up. It didn't happen. Now there's somebody that can be blamed for it. But like, I'm here to tell you that that's the opposite of what needs to happen. Like, you can't be afraid to ask. What do you think people are just going to like sleep through the renewal and forget about it and wake up and be like, oh, I had a renewal. Now it's too late. It's fine. Like that's, you got to ask. And what most people do wrong is they ask the question at the 30-day mark, like 30 days before a renewal. Like, I don't know about your last few relationships, but I knew if I was going to stay with someone 30 days before I made the decision to not, or vice versa, right? Like same thing with a company. Like you're asking people when they've already made up their mind. And if they're angry, they've been resentful for a while. And if they're happy, you missed out on a lot of marketing collateral that you could have collected. So again, I think that the minimum is 90 days, minimum. And for most companies, you should literally be asking every 30 days, not with an NPS score if they would recommend you, or a 5-star rating. Those have their places, but it's not in that. And you got to have that hard conversation. And if you have 60,000 customers, that hard conversation needs to be phased out in different tiers. And you need to find a way to automate that question. And you need to ask the hard questions. So instead of asking people, would you recommend me to a friend? You need to ask people, your renewal is coming up in 6 months. Like, you're important.
Are you planning to renew?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. I have another question, and this is very timely. It's timely for a lot of companies, and it's timely to be honest, for my company. COVID-19 hits, companies are going through difficult times. Customer success teams reach out and the people say, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm going to renew because we're having a lot of difficulty. And the customer success team, we're all reading and we say we need to be flexible, we need to be accommodating, and we need to be nice to our customers and our guests and our members. And so we say, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we, this is a long-winded, I'm rambling now, but the point is that the customer success team says, let's defer the decision for some period of time. I guess the bigger question is, do you agree there's a world, and I've been at companies like this, where you keep deferring the renewal. They say, I'm not happy. And because you don't want to accept it as a closed lost opportunity, you don't want to accept to write churn into the book. So what you try to do is you keep pushing the renewal date out. You say, let's try another 3 months, versus there's a point probably at which companies say, as much as I want to, I understand you're going through difficult budgetary times. I understand that, maybe things will change, but at some point it just doesn't feel like you want to pay us anymore. And we need to absorb the difficult pain of losing you as a customer. So you can tell where my head's at, but what's your recommendation to companies that are struggling with their customer base, going through difficult economic periods, and trying to ensure that they maintain a relationship through COVID while also not lying to themselves about what their true churn metrics are and recurring revenue metrics are?
Yeah, listen, this is such an important question at this time. And I want to, just say that, again, it's different for every company, but the thing that's the same across the board right now is that we're in a challenging time, right? As a nation, and companies are having to really take hits, and those companies are your customers. So this is where I say C squared comes in. This is my, again, I have my little talking points that I'm
very excited to hear what C squared means.
And this is the customer's customer. The first thing you have to do as an organization is stop thinking about what you need to survive, and you need to think about what your customers need to survive. Because right now, your customers, they already did probably sit in a room and they said, what products and tools and services do we have right now that we can cut? And the first question that went through all of their minds was, which products do we have right now that might help us keep customers? So whatever you do, you need to ask yourself that question for your customers. What does my tool do? What does my service do? What does my agency do? What does my job do that keeps customers? And then you need to send out a message. You need to not be afraid and say, we understand these are trying times, whatever the message is. I'm not the best person to ask that. Research what the best message is that will resonate on that front. And then from there, the question needs to be, or the answer needs to be, this is why you should continue with us. We are putting full efforts into making sure that your customers are healthy during this time and can stay with you. You need to have that question, but mainly you need to ask and you need to get on the phone. So your C-level team needs to now become your frontline customer success managers. Your VPs, directors, any manager needs to now be a customer success manager do not fire your most important team, which is the customer success team right now, while they're out there asking the hard questions of their customers and what they can do to keep them moving forward. Your customer success team needs to be working incredibly closely with sales right now, to be watching those red flags, to be watching those indicators, to be, tagging in with the customers that might not be as big of a financial impact and reaching out to them. So the main thing to know is that using that same model I talked about before with the 4 A's, you need to roll out your map. You need to say, you're responsible for this, you're responsible for this, you're responsible for this. But everything is the customer experience right now. Going after and trying to acquire new customers, sure. Of course, you should try to continue to do that. I'm bringing on new business in this. It's something where if people need you, just like the customers are saying, you can do it. But your most important revenue source right now is going to come from renewals. That is your new quota. And going back to that customer that I worked for, what they did successfully, I worked for this company during the last recession. And I did not know what a recession was at the end of it because they did the right things. All of a sudden, sales was literally sitting next to me in my cubicle, and we were coming up with game plans to reach out to customers together. Instead of being in silos on other sides of the office, which we were before, we now shared a desk. And that is how sales and CS need to be right now. They need to be, hand in hand, working together on outreach and making sure that customers are nurtured and taken care of at this time. So hopefully that helps, but it is definitely the make it or break it for companies. And don't be afraid to ask. Don't let fear come in. If they're going to leave, they're going to leave, and you at least have that number ahead of time so you can add it into your, expansion in other areas.
There you go. That was my last question, which is, all of that said, sometimes they're still on the fence. And my experience, I guess I was leading the witness a little bit. My experience is that deferring the pain doesn't make it, bad news doesn't get better with time.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're going to leave, telling them that they have 3 more months of free service, if they don't want to pay, I personally have found so much connection between just people's simple willingness to pay for something and whether they truly value it. And if they're not willing to pay for it, that you can tell them they get a year free, and that's how they'll value it. They won't value it at all because it's free. So
Sam, I could not, that is actually very, very, very important. So we need to repeat what you just said because it's 100%. If you give it away for free, they're not going to value it. In addition, I call this the cell phone conundrum. Remember back in the day where it was like AT&T and Sprint and all those were like, if you switch over, you don't have to pay for your cell phone for 3 months and we'll get you out of your contract. Well, guess what? 3 months later, you're going back to the other one, right? Now you're in the spot where you never have to pay. You devalue yourself. The only time, in my opinion, you give something away for free, as opposed to saying, we understand, we'll reach out and see when you can join us again, is if it is a high value customer that you've had a conversation with, that is bought in, that needs a break. That is totally different than just offering it up in some marketing collateral, because you're going to lose the buy-in. So
high five.
I just wanted to yeah, absolutely. High five.
Agree. Leah, we're coming to the end of our time together, but we're going to talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals. But before we do that, we like to pay it forward a little bit, and we like to know who. And it doesn't have to just be people. It could be books you've read. It could be podcasts you've listened to. It could be any ideas that you want to propagate and promulgate. Who are the influences? Who are the people or the ideas or the things that you think we should know about that have informed your perspective on the world?
Yeah, listen, it's such a great question. I am, I'm sure you heard me mention my wife. I'm a big advocate of the LGBTQ AI community. My wife, Katie, and I were very lucky when we were in Austin to run a group there that got to work with helping members find jobs in the tech space. Here, we do our best to try to advocate where we can. But there are so many great leaders out there in the tech space that are making just great moves, right? And so I don't know them personally, but some of the powerhouses that I watch include Jen Wong, who's the COO of Reddit, Emma McElroy, who's the CEO and founder of WildFang here in Portland. So I'm a big advocate for anybody who speaks up and helps to make sure that the tech space is, diverse. And for me, that's the LGBTQ space. And in addition to that, just anyone who's out there trying to make the world a better place and working for diversity and inclusion for people of color, for underrepresented communities. Portland has some great leaders that help across the board with refugees, helping to place people in amazing tech companies. But I think as passionate as I am about the SaaS space, if there's anything that just kind of bums me out sometime, it's our lack of progress there. And we've got to be better. I've got to be better. Everybody's got to be better there. So that's something I'm really big on. Other than that, I love working with sales teams. If there's one thing I can leave us on that I'm passionate about, when I look at my extensively long resume, because like I said, I get bored when things work, of companies that I've worked for in the startup space, larger companies. I've got a pretty good win rate for companies that have made it successfully, but I have some that have failed miserably. And I think one of the keys outside of just making customer experience the DNA of your organization is the synergy between sales and customer success. The first thing I did when I accidentally made my agency successful, because I never thought this shit was going to work, is I hired a gentleman that I had worked with that was the leader of a sales team at a company that I was the leader of a CS team with. And I said, hey, can you come join me? And it's because when sales and CS, starting with the leaders, have great synergy, the company works. These teams should be hand in hand. I think that sales and CS is those silos need to just go away immediately. You've got to just bust down that wall. There's so much finger pointing where we can work together to like make sure that renewals are successful, to make sure that new customers coming on are supported early from the customer success team, to make sure that sales isn't flinging an account over and just trying to get more numbers on the board for the quota. Like when you figure this out in an organization, it is literally the difference between success and failure. So I really appreciate you letting me say all that, Sam. Like I just really enjoyed our conversation. I think we're proof that sales and CS can work together, right?
I mean, I'm a believer. I'm already a convert. I have a question for you. What does AI stand for at the end of LGBTQ?
Oh gosh, you're going to put me on the spot in that. There's a lot of letters, and they continue to add because more and more people, continue to add. Intersex is the last one. I think A is. I'd have to. I'm embarrassed to say. Is it androgyny?
Don't be embarrassed. It's okay. Because you're right. The point is anybody and however they identify and whatever their preferences are, we support them and we believe in them.
Okay. I got to tell you though, it does sound fair. And I pulled it up real quick because I do think it's important. The question mark is for questioning.
Got it.
So it's
cool.
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, questioning, intersex is the last one. Okay. Anyways, I'm sorry on that. I'm embarrassed to say again, I need to be better as well. So, but yes.
Fair enough. Don't be embarrassed. It's okay.
Asexual. There it is. Asexual.
Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, cool. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Well, whoever you are in the world, we support you and we believe in you. And Leah, if folks want to reach out because they want to get in touch with you, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are trying to solve this problem of customer success and they probably want to hire BetterGrowth. So what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. I think it's just one of the, great tools of our time for communication. Wish I could say the same about Facebook. I personally am not doing that anymore. Spend too much of my time on it. But yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great way to reach out. I encourage people to reach out. I would like to say that if you are, you don't have to reach out just to, for BetterGrowth. Like if you would like to speak to somebody who is, in the LGBTQ AI community, and if you want to have an advocate or advice, I offer free career advice to anybody that needs it. I also would like to offer free advice to any companies that are looking for better ways to build out their benefits platform to include top surgery and other things that are, oftentimes left off of the needs of the LGBTQ AI community as well. And then, of course, for any companies that are looking to do some awesome things and to combat churn, I'm your person. Like I'm the person to come to for that. Like I live and breathe that every day.
We believe you. Leah, thanks so much for being on the show. We're going to talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals. It's been great talking to you.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate it, Sam.
Hey, everybody. It's Sam's Corner. What a great conversation with Leah Chaney. And I really enjoyed speaking to her. She's clearly so passionate about customer service and customer success and just making your customers the center of the journey, which I think is so important. One of the things that jumped out at me is just that, for me and my experience, I've always been so focused on onboarding the customer. But she talks about how, that's the honeymoon phase. And really, there needs to be work. I mean, this sounds obvious, but there needs to be a lot of work post-onboarding, but before renewal, where you are regularly checking in and getting feedback from the customer on whether they would renew if that renewal was today. I thought that was a powerful insight. And I think that she calls that the activation phase. Maybe it's the adoption phase. But the point is, it's one of the 4 A's that she talked about. The point is that the period after the onboarding becomes the most important period. The other thing that she mentioned is that she doesn't really believe that, there should be the money person and the customer success person that doesn't handle money. And that in the modern world, you can really combine those functions and have the one person that obviously is capable of having a money or financial conversation at the same time they're capable of doing a great job on customer service and customer success. So I really like that conversation, and she's clearly super insightful. If you want to reach me, you can. LinkedIn.com/in/Sam F. Jacobs. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors before we go. Those sponsors being Outreach, the revolutionizing customer engagement platform, which helps you leverage the next generation of artificial intelligence, allowing sales reps to deliver consistent, relevant, and responsible communication. And of course, LinkedIn, LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a relationship-based digital selling tool that is designed to help you do just that. It can help your sales teams increase their pipeline win rates and deal sizes. Go to sales.linkedin.com to try it out for yourself. I'll talk to you next time.